Okay. Welcome to the meeting of the first Zoom meeting of the Kennebunkport Planning Board. Excuse me. We are first going to take the roll call of who is here from the planning board. I see that we have a quorum, but we're missing a couple people. So hopefully we'll figure this out. But let me take a roll call. First, we have Larry Simmons.
Here.
Okay. Nina Perlmutter and Ed Francis and John Harcourt are here, as well as myself. George Lichty and Scott Mahoney don't seem to be here yet, but if they are and came in a weird way, would they please raise their hand? Whoops, something just changed.
Yep.
Oh, we lost Nina. Oh boy. Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is a virtual planning board meeting, and we're using the Zoom conferencing format. The agenda is posted on the town's website on the planning board page and has the information needed for the public to participate in the Zoom meeting. If you'd like to participate through Zoom, you can do so by joining the meeting ID 990-1659-4663. I should, however, point out that this particular meeting is all initial presentations. 3 items are being initially presented, which, excuse me, means we will not be having any public meeting, so nobody but presenters and planning board members will be speaking during this. So the rest of the script says if you wish to make a public comment or speak after joining the meeting, you can use raise your hand. But again, that's something for the next time. Okay, first thing on the agenda is, and we still have a quorum. Okay, I'm certainly hoping the other folks are going to join in. Excuse me. The first step on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the March 4th meeting from March 4th, 2020. So any comments from the other 3 people here? John, Ed. Okay, then please unmute yourself long enough to make a motion.
Oh, I move to accept the minutes as written.
Ed Francis, I agree.
Second. Okay, so I'm going to take a vote, and I do by roll call, which means you will have to unmute briefly to say yay. So I'm in favor. So yay for me. Larry?
Yay for me.
Ed?
Yay.
John? Unmute. Thumbs up doesn't count. It's lovely that you can do thumbs up, but I do really need the word yay, probably. If you can find the mute.
Screen, there'll be a select.
If you press the space bar, you should unmute.
Yeah.
I see. If you go to the panelists section, you should have the option to unmute. Do you have something called
Your iPad
participants?
is just right up along the top. You just have to touch up at the top and you'll get to it.
Not on mine, Tom.
Well, anyway, let's proceed, and hopefully John will figure out how to unmute before he needs to ask a question. But he did indicate in the affirmative. So the minutes are approved. Our agenda, the first item on the agenda is item 200-203, Kennebunkport Heritage Housing Trust, Sebago Techniques authorized agent, a preliminary subdivision initial review of this preliminary subdivision plan. So if Steve Doe or somebody from KHHT is there to make a presentation, we'd love to have it.
This is just a note. I noticed there's a whole bunch of people registered as Lisa Harmon on the attendee list. There's like 15 attendees and 10 of them are Lisa Harmon. So that might be part of the issue.
Yep. I'm wondering, Dave, if we can individually open each Lisa Harmon, find out who it is, and rename them. Hold your horses.
Jesus. The next agenda item is Edward Bassett. Item 2301. Yes, and you could probably unpromote a few Lisa Harmons. Okay.
Hello. Hello. This is Ed. Hello. Okay.
Hi, Ed. Thanks for bearing with us. We'll get the board unmuted here, and we'll have Tom introduce your application here shortly.
I'm going to introduce the third item, item 200-301 Edward and Leona Bassett, a minor subdivision change. This is the initial review. And it's, I guess I'll leave the rest to Mr. Bassett to present.
Good evening. Can you folks hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Unfortunately, I can't get the picture, so I'm just going to have to go with the voice. My application is for, as they said, the changing of a subdivision line in essence. A few years ago, we purchased an acre of land. Neighbors of ours, Geraldine, Sarah's, and ourselves purchased an acre of land and split it between the two of us. And she is looking to sell hers. We have purchased that land. And our purpose here tonight is to try to get you folks to unconnect the lot from her lot and place it in, attach it to my lot number 35. She's at 34. Nothing is going to change. The development, there will be no development of it. It is still an undeveloped lot. It's a perfect little place for animals to go through and what have you, and it's a little buffer for us from recent developments. But basically, all it is, in simplicity, is to erase the connection to lot 34 and connect it to the line for lot 35. I believe you have a map that illustrates that I sent to the board.
Yes, we do.
I don't have a map, Tom.
It was in the package that was emailed plus, I mean, I actually have the color one. I don't know exactly where I came up with that, but it was in that package around halfway through or something.
Yes, I can go ahead and pull that up. Okay, so not sure that I can rotate here what's on the, this is pulling off of the website, but I'll just, kind of show with my arrow, here.
The crosshatched piece.
It's the crosshatched portion here, so, oftentimes the board wants to know why a particular application is in front of them. So, this particular application is in front of you because it's a modification to a previously approved subdivision. And so what we have here is a minor amendment that, that involves, essentially, a land swap between two property owners. This wouldn't typically come to the board, but because it's a modification to a previously approved subdivision plan, that's why it's here in front of the planning board. As Mr. Bassett was sharing with us, this was a swap that had occurred previously. That there had been a land swap that had happened between the two neighbors before, and this is essentially kind of a swap back of a portion thereof.
So this.
There we go. Thanks.
And do I understand this is on the town website, Warner, and I just missed it?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, that's what I've pulled up here. This is the Mr. Bassett's application that's located on the town's website.
Apologies, I missed that.
Yeah.
So I was looking. This is Ed again. I was looking for something that told me before and after what the two lots look like. In other words, how big is the lot before and how big is it afterwards? And does it, are they both legal lots after that? Obviously.
Yeah, yes, they are. The lot that we're looking at is the one with the hash marks, the one that we're asking to join on to the other green to the right of it is 0.41 acres. And the piece that it's attaching to was added before, made it was 0.59 for a total of 1 acre, that long rectangle, if you include the hash marked area.
And those are the deltas. What, you have two lots, lot 11 and lot 12, as I understand it. Both of
Yeah.
them were added on to, one of
That's
them
correct.
by about a half an acre apiece.
That's correct.
So how big is lot 11 now, and how big will it be after it's debited, and likewise on 12?
All right, lot 11 will be 1/2 acre less than what it is right now, or 0.41. If we can call it 1/2, that's okay by me.
That 0.41 is fine. What is it now, though?
The total, I don't know. I don't know what 11 is total. But that hash mark area is 0.41 acres.
I understand. Do you see my question? And Werner, maybe you can help me out with this. Are we going to make 11 a non-conforming lot by doing this?
No, so at the end of this, so both lots will remain as conforming lots. They were both previously conforming lots, prior to this swap that happened a number of years ago. And after this conveyance is done, lot 11, what you see as lot 11, which is actually a combination of lot 11 and lot 10. If you can, that comprises of one of the parcels. And then Mr. Bassett's piece is lot 12, but then there's those two other unnumbered polygons that become part of it as well. But the end result is that both lots will remain legally conforming lots for the zone, which in the Dutrock zone is 40,000 square feet.
So Werner, in just above your arrow, I think there's something that talks about square feet.
That's correct, yes.
I can't read that, but
So remaining land is 50,000, I believe, 704 square feet.
so it's conforming.
Correct.
Thank you for that.
Yep. Yeah, I was looking for that control. I think I'd have to download it. Oh, there we go. My So yeah, so what you'll see there, is that the remaining lot will the remaining land of Cerez remains at 50,704.
Thank you. May I ask one more question, unrelated? This is Ed again.
Yes.
On the package that I have, it has a page called Abutting Properties,
Yes.
and it lists Atlantic Holdings in Kennebunk and a Goose, someone out on Goose Rocks Road.
At the back end of is the real 200-foot abutters list, at the back of the whole package.
Right. If you look at the screen, Ed, here's the full abutters list that was sent out.
I must have somehow lost part of my package. I don't. I'm
This,
sorry.
Yeah, it's all I printed the package out. Actually, I printed it out once by accident, but
I
it's,
got mine in the mail, I think.
Mhm.
I'm sure.
One
I-
was sent to everybody.
Okay. So we're good with the abutters list, and I should ignore that.
yeah, the one that's crossed out is just crossed out. The real one's on the back.
Mine isn't crossed out, Tom.
Okay,
Again, the one I got in the mail is just the abutters list.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
okay. So I think from what I've seen, it looks to me to be a complete package. The one that's on the website, that is.
Yes, thank you.
And can you, I guess I would like a motion to approve this as complete.
So moved.
Okay, so John moved, so moved. Anybody seconding?
Second, it's Larry.
Okay, can Werner, can you ungrab the screen so we can see people again?
Yes, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll second it.
Okay, so we're gonna go through all favor. I see that John now has a voice.
Yep.
The motion to say that it is complete, I am in favor,
Aye.
and Ed is in favor, I believe.
Aye.
John
Aye.
and Larry.
Aye.
Okay, so it is complete. Now, this means we need to either schedule a public hearing for this one, or if it's really this minor, maybe we could get away with not scheduling a public hearing.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I can speak to that, piece a little bit. So, because this application comes to you through your subdivision regs, and it does not come through your site plan review process, the planning board has the option to decide whether or not they want to have a public hearing on this particular piece or this particular application, excuse me. So it's up to the board, under your subdivision regulations, whether or not to hold a public hearing for this.
Okay,
I move that we not hold a public hearing.
I'll second that.
May I ask, is there a reason that this is time sensitive?
It is not time sensitive.
One of the things we've done in the past is for someone to assume that it's all going to go well and to be assigned as case manager and prepare findings. And that way
Yeah.
we can allow for a public meeting. Open
Yeah.
and close it, as sometimes happened. And
That's true. We should probably do it that way. We still got to we still have to read the finding of facts at the next meeting. So,
that's okay. That's what I prefer.
yeah, well, let's go that way. I'll go with Ed on that. So now what I need is someone to write up a finding of facts. Now, this is a finding of facts in accordance with the planning, with the subregs, not a finding, not, it doesn't have all of the.
So just a
all
point,
The different
point.
batches of findings. It's in
So-
the sub,
so I believe you have a motion on the floor from John
yeah, we have
that
to,
that should be addressed.
yeah, we should, I'm changing my mind and I don't think.
Vote on that motion.
I withdraw the motion.
Okay, I concur on the withdrawal. Okay, so what I need, we already have, it's deemed complete. We just need somebody to write a finding of facts.
With
And,
Werner's guidance, I'll volunteer to do that.
okay, John is the case manager.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. And so I guess in that case, thank you, Mr. Bassett. We will be reading it. We will be soliciting public comments and probably not get any next time. And at the next meeting in 2 weeks. And at that point, we'll have a finding of facts prepared, which we'll read, and then it will be history, basically. You'll be all set.
Assuming there's no public
Terrific.
comment, we anticipate that this will be approved.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
Yeah, so just so that I'm clear, is it, my understanding that the board is directing us to go ahead and post a notice of a public hearing for Mr. Bassett's application for the next planning board meeting.
Yes.
But to also, that the intent is to hold the public hearing, and provided that everything is in agreement with what I'm hearing from the board, that you would subsequently be reading a set of findings after that, after the
Yeah.
close of the public hearing.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bassett.
I see that we have Scott Mahoney in the audience, and so I'd like to go ahead and bring him in as a panelist.
Good. And we have, do we have, first
I think
off,
we
do we
have-
have Mr. McKellar here?
This is one of them. Can you hear me? This is Pat Clancy. I did call Steve Doe. He should be on now, so I don't know whether he's showing up as a Lisa Harmon or not, but he should be on the call, on the Zoom.
Yep. Yeah, they should be present. So, all right. So I think we should probably lower the hands and ask the real Steve Doe to raise his hand.
Jesus. Oh, geez.
I got it.
Yep.
Okay, you want the connected by phone number?
Yep.
It's,
I'll send it to him.
it says 1929-205-6099. And then you have to enter the webinar number. You have that? I have that if you need it. The webinar number is 990-1659-4663. We could hear Michael McKellar if he's there.
All right, so I think Michael McKellar is probably the last one. Take a chance. That is the real Mike McKellar.
Huh? Okay, so that brings us to find my item 200503, Michael McKellar doing business as New Point LLC, initial review of a site plan review.
Okay, all set.
We can
Okay,
hear-
great. So yes, I am currently under contract on 184 Beechwood Avenue, which is being operated as Terrapin Landscaping by Michael Corsi. I have been in the seafood industry for the last 20 years. I'm currently a minority owner of a company in Saco that's doing seafood distribution, and I'm branching out on my own with a company called New Point LLC, or New Point Lobster Co. I'm looking to purchase this building and use it for my distribution and office space brokering hub. What I'll be doing there is simply package boxes.
What's going on?
Oh, guys all set?
I think we've got a couple of the other Lisa Harmons that we're going to mute here.
Oh.
Okay, sorry about that. Mike, go ahead.
Okay. So I'd be looking to purchase the property and change the use currently from landscaping warehouse to seafood distribution, I guess. Essentially what I'll be doing in that property is buying packaged fresh and frozen seafood that will be put into a cooler, a freezer, prepackaged, no processing, no live lobster tanks, any of that. Then I'll be taking that product, packaging it in styrofoam boxes for UPS to deliver to restaurant, retail customers, and fulfillment for e-commerce online customers. That's my background. Like I said, I'm currently own and operate a live lobster facility. Again, I won't be doing any of that. Any live lobster sales that I do as part of New Point LLC will be done on a brokering level only, meaning it's just putting deals together that happen elsewhere. So essentially, just looking to package boxes. Operating hours, Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. roughly. Pack boxes during the day. UPS picks up in the afternoon to take those boxes off for overnight delivery. And that's essentially the business in a nutshell. I know there are some concerns from some abutters because in the past there's been Cape Porpoise lobster there and Terrapin, where there's machinery, there's trucking kind of constantly going and a lot of noise. In my situation, I'll be operating with one small refrigerated vehicle, a cargo van, if you will, where I'll be doing my own pickups. There'll be an occasional drop off but it's not going to be in the capacity of, 53-foot trailers backing up to drop off loads of lobster or bait or anything of that nature. So I think audibly, it's not going to be any issue as compared to what they might have been accustomed to with Cape Porpoise lobster in the past. There will be a cooler and freezer that I'm looking to install on the property, which would sit on a pad outside. And there are 8 by 12 units with 3/4 horse to 1.5 horse compressors. Again, if those are any sort of issue in regard to noise to some of the abutters, I'm glad to make arrangements to put fencing or anything to make that noise as subdued as possible. But I don't think it would be much of anything. And outside of that, it would just be my office space and a place to pack boxes for UPS overnight delivery. Employees wise, it would be myself, maybe 1 or 2 other folks, but initially it's going to be myself and probably 1 other. And if I get to 3 or 4, quite frankly, I've outgrown that building and would be looking to move on elsewhere. So not a large operation by any means. I live right down the road, 100 Oak Ridge Road. So I'm about 2 miles from the facility. So it's works out perfectly for me. I've got a son that goes to Consolidated. So it makes life a little bit easier as regard to what I do right down the street. So that's the 30,000-foot overview, and glad to take any questions you guys might have.
Okay, thank you. Now this is a quick question for Werner. This is a change of use from warehouse to fish processing. I realize he says it isn't fish processing, but that's the only use I can see that we can allow it to under. So,
Yeah, so you have there's a number of options that you have in there. You have warehouse, that's a use, and then you also have wholesaling as a use as well. And so all of those are listed as conditional uses in the in the farm and forest zone.
that's true.
So as we go to the
I think the
definition,
application says warehouse.
correct, yes.
So it's really a change of use from warehouse to warehouse.
From landscape, from a landscape, a landscaping warehouse with, outdoor storage, to, as Mike has presented, to a warehouse with, with interior storage, with, I believe, there's a cooler, I believe that's being added to, if I'm correct on that, Mike.
That's correct. So an 8 by 12 cooler and an 8 by 12 freezer. There's the bones of an existing cooler there from the Cape Porpoise days, but quite frankly, that needs to be demoed. And there's a concrete pad where just a cooler and freezer can be assembled. Those units that have the interlocking wall units, they're all self-contained, would just be put in place on those pads.
Now, would you then walk outside to get to them, or would they be somehow attached to your building?
They would be attached to the building. I'd be able to enter the cooler and freezer from the inside of the building. So just the units themselves would sit outside, but I would enter them from inside. They'd be protected from the elements with an overhang. And of course, if there's an audible issue, a fence can be erected around them to kind of keep them even more contained.
Okay. So, yeah, I take it you've seen all of the different letters from abutters.
I have.
So this is the initial hearing, not the public hearing is when the abutters comments can be, we just got them today, basically. So they will be mostly fuel for the next meeting.
Sure.
But let's see if I
Yeah, I mean, I think
and open it up to the others here. I guess my only other question, and this is for Werner, that in the back of this, it has a description, it has something from Al Frick from 23 years ago about the septic.
Correct.
You know, it's nice to know that Al Frick thought it was a good septic system 23 years ago. But I guess that part was more part of the P&S than part of this presentation.
For what it's worth, I just had a septic inspection done. Obviously, I did that for my purposes to make sure that everything was up to spec, and it
Yes.
is.
Well, that's good.
There's 3 trees, to be completely transparent, that are on the road side that sit on the end of the property, the north side of the property, that would most likely need to be taken down on the recommendation of the septic inspector because the roots are going into the leach field. In order for me not to have to pay for a new leach field in the coming years, he recommended I take those 3 trees down, but they're not acting as a barrier from the building to anybody's home around. They're on the road side. So.
And how big are the trees?
I wish I was, more knowledgeable in trees. Unfortunately, they look like a really large bush, quite frankly, that's grown to a tree size. They're probably about 15 to 20 feet tall. They're all very similar. They're not a traditional pine or oak or maple. They're some sort of large bush that's grown to tree size.
Okay, and the question would be the circumference or radius of the diameter or something of the trunk.
Yeah, I would say they're probably all about maybe 3 to 4 feet wide.
No, the trunk.
Oh, the trunk itself? Oh God, no. The trunk itself is probably, I don't know, maybe 8 inches.
Okay.
Along those lines.
So I don't think, Werner, that wouldn't be a problem, right?
No, and again, in looking at the septic system design, so you have 2 designs here that were permitted for the property. One was for between 15 to 20 employees, and then the other was a supplemental, that was for a floor drain system, when there was actual processing, that was being done. When the property was owned by Cape Porpoise Lobster.
Okay. So I guess what we need to do now is to have folks, we need to review the plan. I didn't see any other issues with it, and then we need to, for the next meeting, we need to have you look at the butter letters and see what, if anything, you might be willing to agree to in a finding of facts for this, in terms of, the things you discussed, the noise and the delivery vans and such. We probably want to get that, what you've told us, to be clarified so that it'll keep the, you'll be able to work with your neighbors.
Sure. Yeah, and for what it's worth, whatever they've mentioned here, there's nothing that I'm opposed to.
Good.
I'm glad to. Again, there's not going to be a lot of traffic going in and out of there, except for my own small cargo van and a UPS vehicle picking up daily. So not a lot of noise in that regard. I know there was a question in regard to garbage and kind of where the dumpster is going to be located. Of course, I live in this neighborhood, so as long I'll put the dumpster out of sight as much as possible. I think there was a concern about whether food would be being dumped in that garbage container and how it would be disposed of. I don't plan to have any waste like that. If I have a lot of waste going into the dumpster, then I'm most likely going to go out of business anyway. So that wouldn't be anything I'm planning to do. Vegetation taking down, I mentioned to you, the only thing I'd be taking down are those 3 trees because they're going to impede with the septic system, the leach field rather. Other than that, everything else is going to stay the same. But I think most of the complaints or concerns over the noise, the concern over the noise and large trucks backing up and things of that nature. I'm not going to have any of that happening. Mike Corsi is planning. I think there was one issue here, a concern about him maintaining a portion of the property. What he's not maintaining the property, but he's going to leave some of his equipment, on equipment, but his supplies, his mulch, some of these things are going to remain on the property as part of our agreement until October 1st. He's moved to a new property in Arundel, and he's slowly taking his time to move stuff off the property. Obviously, it's his busy time being a landscaper. So I've agreed to allow him to continue to store his stuff there until October 1st, where he'll slowly remove it. So I think one abutter had mentioned, are two businesses going to be operating there at the same time? That's not the case as far as I see it. Again, it's just a storage application, and he'll take it to his new property as he can.
Okay. So, any other questions from board members?
Mike, I have just one question. Have you met with any of the abutters yet?
Personally, no, I haven't. But I'm certainly glad to.
Tom?
If anybody wants to have a
Can
discussion.
you,
Hey, Nina, you've been coming in and out.
So, Tom, I think process-wise, what would be helpful would be to, however the board members are across your screen, is to call each of them individually and give them opportunity that if they have any questions to ask, they can do so, and just kind of move through them.
Sure.
In the grid, fashion.
Let me start with Nina, because she's right. She just is online. So, Nina, do you have questions for
can
Mr.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. One, his PNS has expired, and so we need better application. Either through Mike Corsi or he needs to extend the PNS. Did that come through?
Yep, kind of to me. You were inquiring about me extending the PNS because it's expired, right?
Yeah, so you have authority for this application because you haven't purchased the land yet.
Right. Okay.
And the other restriction I think you should think about that I would consider is that, one, there's no processing on the property, and two,
I think we lost you.
Yeah. So to just quickly address, the PNS question, we do have as well, in addition to that, a separate letter of authorization from the current property owner that allows Mike McKellar to appear before the board to ask for this change in use. So he's been specifically authorized beyond the PNS.
As long as we get an updated
Okay.
PN for the
I
next
did-
meeting, we're good.
Isn't that letter conditioned upon Mike closing?
Well, the PNS, or I'm sorry, the letter of authorization gives him permission to apply for the change of use for 184 Beechwood. It does request that if he doesn't close on the sale, that the current use still remain authorized. So in other words, you could have a situation where where the board could authorize the change of use for the property, but then something could occur between the board authorizing the change of use and the actual property then changing hands. And so I think that's my read of this letter, is the request that if for some reason the sale didn't happen after the board had granted approval for the change of use, that Mr. Corsi would not have to then subsequently have to come back to this board to change it back to what he just had.
And just for what it's worth, we had an original closing date of everything's been changing on the fly here, but original closing date of June 3rd. So you guys might be looking at our original copy. That's been extended to a closing date of the 19th.
That may need to be extended again, because our next meeting is the 16th.
Yep.
And that's when we'll be doing public hearing. It's not necessarily the time we will approve it either. So we will extend it beyond that to July. So Nina, I think if you're back, you had another question.
Yeah, it involved restrict. Yeah, I've tried that. Sometimes it works. I'm considering a restriction. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the bandwidth will be increased, but not till Friday. Okay. Phone is difficult here. I can't get in right now through phone. Can you hear anything I'm saying?
Every other word, yes.
Every other word. Okay. A restriction that basically keeps the business wholesale, not retail. Did that come through?
Yes.
Yeah, I have no intention of doing any retail out of that location. Zero.
Okay. Well, I would consider that a written restriction.
Sure. I have no problem signing something that says there'll be no retail out of there.
Okay, so if Nina is done, how about Scott? Do you have any comments on this application? You'd like to ask questions?
So is there, from a wholesale perspective, a capacity limit to the amount of, daily outgoing poundage?
It's really probably a box limit, because the styrofoam insulated coolers that I use so they can travel overnight around the country take up a decent amount of space. So I'll probably at some point get to a capacity, hopefully, that would outgrow that space. And if that was the case, if I was moving that many boxes, it's hard to put a count on it. But if it's 500 boxes in a day, I would be outgrowing that space, and quite frankly, would probably want to move to a facility that would be closer access to the highway, and things of that nature in an industrial park at that point. I don't think out of the gates I'll get anywhere close to that. But it's certainly something that I'm looking to build to. And if that's the case, I would move on from that property to someplace else and either sell the property or who knows what I would do with it. But it wouldn't work in my capacity anymore.
That's a reasonable answer, Mike, because otherwise you'd have an 18-wheeler or 2 or 3 coming down there, right?
No, and it, like I said, it works great now because I'm a startup, essentially, even though I've been in the business for so long, and it's right down the street from my house, so it's perfect to kind of get the ball rolling. But I anticipate if it all goes well that I won't be in that facility after 2 years, let's call it, and I'll be on to something else. So.
Oh, thank you. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Okay, Ed, Francis, comments?
Yes, thanks, Tom. The question I have is for the board, and then I have a comment for the applicant. Is the board comfortable with meeting the condition that Werner just alluded to, which says we're really asking for a conditional approval of this that would go into effect at the time of the sale? I don't have a problem with that, but I haven't noted that we've done that before. In other words, a positive outcome here for the applicant will be, yes, the board will authorize going to this use should you close on the property.
I believe we've done something like that before. I recall seeing P&Ss in stacks of, in lieu of deeds before, so.
Okay, and we just write the findings that way.
Yes, we just write the findings that way.
Yeah,
So,
I believe that, as long as it's made, that the intention is made clear within the findings, that's a helpful piece of information there. Ultimately, at the end of the day, either, Mike McKellar or Michael Corsi, they will have the choice as to whether or not to record that set of findings, that formalizes, the decision of the board. Ultimately, if there's no action taken towards the change of use, the board's expiration would expire.
that would be a year, wouldn't it, Werner?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So sounds good.
Yeah, but I think having something in the findings that that just makes it clear, of what the intent is helpful.
Okay. And so the second the comment I have, Mike, is just to say that in the past, what's been helpful when we get such articulate comments from the public ahead of the public hearing, what works best is if the applicant in advance goes through those comments and puts down answers to them. In other words, you could imagine even doing it, interspersing your answers and coming back through Werner, and then you could go through those. Because I think there's enough of them that you'll miss one, and sure enough, it'll be the one that's most important to somebody, even though it wasn't obvious. The one that jumps out at me is it says, when this property was operated before, there were conditions in place when it was operated as a seafood facility. We'd like to see those stipulations or similar ones be levied again. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on those. Maybe some of them don't make any sense. Maybe there's some others that you would advocate for in lieu of those. But just to have you lead us in that, rather than us guessing what might satisfy you and satisfy the abutters, that would be so helpful.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And you want me to answer that now?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, just come back with your own
Come back with your own
thoughts on it.
within a week or so, and then it'll be available for the next meeting with answers.
Okay.
And hopefully that's the point where we'll be asking for public comments also.
Sure.
And hopefully we've already answered a lot of the items, and everybody will be happy.
It can also serve as an opening to the abutters to start a conversation. We may not understand exactly what they meant by their words,
Right.
but you'd have a big step forward in that. I think it'll expedite the process.
And the other thing which, about what date things will finish, if there is significant public comment comes in at our public hearing, because of the Zoom platform, we may end up continuing the public hearing to the following meeting to make sure we get all comments in. So this may take another couple of our meetings before this will get all sorted out.
Werner, is there a way, if Mike comes back with comments in a few days, that they could be distributed to the abutters through your office?
Yeah, so certainly, if we get additional documentation that comes in from Mike, what we can do at that point is we can take that and we can post that as an additional document on the website, within that area, so that it's available for everyone.
Well, if that's useful, Mike, again, you could take advantage of it.
Yeah, no, that'd be
Your
great.
call.
I'll definitely supply some answers to these questions as early as tomorrow and get them off to Werner, because obviously, of course, we are under the gun to some extent, and I certainly don't want Mike or the seller to get itchy in any capacity, and maybe somebody's waiting in the wings that is not looking to do what I'm doing. I don't know. I don't want to lose the property. I've been working on it for quite some time and spent a lot of money already on it. So.
Okay, John
Sounds good.
Harcourt, you have questions?
I've already asked my questions, thanks.
Okay. Larry, you're always good for questions.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. My first question involves, well, I guess they all center around the same thing, but so what modifications is going to have to be done to the facility in order to make it, well, bring it up to service your plans? I know you're going to add a refrigerator, but are you going to add any, I don't know, fire suppression system or eye wash station, any of that kind of stuff?
No, it's not necessary for what I'm doing. So the only thing I'll be doing is, and you've got the photos and everything of the building here. There's one section of the building that was added on by Cape Porpoise that housed their cooler. It needs to be torn down. So the original A-frame of the building will remain. So that section portion, if you're looking at the building to the left, will be torn off. And then like I said, a cooler and a freezer, 2 separate units, will be put on that pad, which will be entered from the inside of the building. Other than that, it's really just cosmetics. I have to repaint, redo the office, take some drywall down and things of that nature inside. I'm actually looking to redo the outside of the building. Currently, it's cedar shake on just the front. I'm hoping to do cedar shake all the way around. Repaint. That's about it. Really, inside, as far as HACCP certifications are concerned and good manufacturing practices are concerned, there's already hand wash sink in there. I'll most likely replace that with a stainless one. But all I really need on top of that is stainless tables that are on rollers to operate off of, rollers that boxes go down, scales. That's about it. Product comes in, gets put in the cooler and freezer, gets packaged, goes out.
Okay, so that leads into my next question, which is, I noticed that some refrigeration systems use something called anhydrous ammonia, and those systems have a bunch of constraints imposed on them, like inspections and certifications and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to answer now, but if you're going to use that sort of refrigeration system, it seems that there could be some OSHA inspections required to make sure you're in compliance with that. And, so that's sort of in the general category of what hazardous or toxic substances do you expect to have on site?
I don't expect to have any. The units that I'm looking to put in place are the same kind of units that you would see in the back of a kitchen, for example, a walk-in cooler in a kitchen, which are small units. I'm looking at an 8x12 self-contained unit. Doesn't have an outside compressor. The compressor sits on top of the unit. So it's just a larger version of what you might see in a big restaurant.
So what do they use for cooling?
You know, I guess I can find that out. I'm not a cooler. I mean, I've got some specs here on what the horsepower is and et cetera, but you know, I can tell you this, I own 20% of a large seafood company now that has a large walk-in cooler, large walk-in freezer with pallets that you can go in there. You can move a fork truck around in it. OSHA doesn't inspect us for those. And they're much, much larger units than I'm putting in.
Okay, it's just a question of the coolant that you're gonna use.
Yeah, I don't know the coolant offhand. I can certainly find that out for you though.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I saw George pop in occasionally as one of the leases. Is George Lichty out there somewhere? And if so, could you, do you have any comments on this application?
I don't see any.
No hands raised?
I don't see any hands raised for George. You're correct. I did see him for a brief moment. Yep.
Well, okay. So the question is, do we feel this is a complete application? I guess one thing we would like to see is your extension, the extended date on the P&S, so that we're just for completeness in the application. So do we have anything else, I guess? Can I have motions if we feel this is a complete application?
Motion to accept this as complete?
I second.
Second.
Okay, so I'm going to go again on the people in favor. So Larry,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Yeah.
nice, Scott,
Aye.
and I'm an aye, and I think that Nana. Oh, I didn't need John's aye, but
Aye.
okay. John, you didn't have to vote. We have a quorum without you. I'm sorry. Anyway, good. So it is approved as complete, which means we will have a public hearing 2 weeks hence on the 17th. People with other comments are urged to send them in writing. It is much easier to send them to Lisa Harmon ahead of time, as was in the written public comments on the application, on the original Zoom agenda. So it's really important we get that. Hopefully we will be a little more worked up. You know, our dry run went much smoother than this has. But anyway, so we will see you, Mike, in 2 weeks. Hopefully, as you suggested, you can go through the existing public comments and give us a nice documentation on same. And so now if we can find Steve Doe, we can do the Heritage Trust. Thank you very much, Mike.
All right. Do we have a case manager for that?
Oh, case manager, yes. Do we have a case manager? Don't all jump up and down at once.
I'll be glad to do it.
Okay, Larry is case manager. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if we can locate Steve Doe, we can do the KHHT. Otherwise, we're going to have to do it next time.
Yes. So I think I do see Steve Doe. I'll go ahead and bring him in.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me from someone?
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm on my cell phone, but I have the computer screen so I can see all you. I don't know if you're able to, are you going to use your screen, Werner, or do you want me to try to use?
So let's try bringing in your computer as the screen. If you can if you can have your computer raise its hand, then we'll know which one to bring in.
Yep, I just raised it.
Okay. Okay, great. And so that one then, Steve, you should be able to, if you leave that one mute, but go ahead and enable the video.
All right, I did that. Now you can see me. All right, so I want to share screen. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. So you're probably trying to share the screen on my phone and not my desktop. That makes sense? It says that's my computer. And it says host disabled participant screen sharing on my computer. Well, if Warner just wants to share his screen. There we go. All right. Can you see? Okay, so this is the town's website. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So these are all the documents we submitted. I'm just going to stay focused on the lot grading plan. That I think shows everything that we're doing much better. So last time we were in front of the board, it was a 5 lots. And once we started working through that, we couldn't make the 5 lots work. We are still going with 6 units. So the way we set this up is there's the 2 lots on Main Street over here, this being a single family, this being a duplex lot. The single family is a minimum 20,000 square foot lot. Lot 2 is a 30,000 square foot lot. And then over on the other side of the property, this is where the road is, where we had it before. We've incorporated a turnaround unobstructed by any parking. And then this will be a duplex. And then this lot will be the single family. Over on this side, right in here is the detention basin. So that this road essentially collects the stormwater and goes into this basin area. With this, we show septic systems, tanks, and the houses with all the grading. Same with all the duplex. You got duplex unit here, septic field there. Parking space is off the road. This parking is over here. These units will be served by public water. We're going to extend main from out here on Main Street. It's going to come in all the way to the end there, and then each house will be serviced by public water. Down here at lots 1 and 2, we're going to be extending water across Route 9. So there'll be 2 water lines that serve these duplex, and then a single line that comes and serves the single unit. Single unit has its septic in the back, and the duplex has its septic in the back. These 1 and 2 share a common driveway right in here. There's parking here, and then parking here. So each unit can function on its own with its own parking, separate walkways. I think that's all I really need to talk about on the plans. We have been talking with the water district, and they've agreed to allow us to connect. It's going to be a 2-inch water line. We are going to shift the water line. Right now, it's right up against the right-of-way. We're going to move it 6 feet in, so it'll come right down kind of the shoulder section of the road. That was based on comments that we got from them. We have, there was concerns from the abutters over here about looking at these. So we have added evergreen plantings in this location. Those, I believe, are shown on the preliminary subdivision plans. I can scroll through. So those are shown right in here. This is the old basin, so we don't need to look at that.
Ooh, lightning.
Whoa.
I guess with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, let me start. You mentioned in your application one submission waiver, and it seems like there might be another additional small waiver necessary because you do have a shared driveway on the lots on the right, not rather than the road. So it's a shared driveway. I believe Werner can correct me if I'm wrong. That would require an easement of a waiver rather also. Not a big deal, but it's we got in that trouble with one of the binnacles. We had to add some little tweaks related to that in the past.
Okay.
Well, one thing just to point out, Tom, I want to make sure that we give, once Steve wraps up with his explanation, we do have representatives from the Housing Trust that are also here as applicants, to discuss the project as well.
Okay. Oh, well, so you want to have them present first?
I think it's fine to go ahead and have for Steve to finish up his piece, to talk through any of the technical questions, or plan questions, that are out there. But I do know that there are board members as applicants that are here that also will wish to speak.
Okay.
May I ask a question?
Please do.
About the connection with the public water, which is great. Do you have I didn't see an estimate of the cost, the fees associated with doing that. I know that the authorization seemed to say that there would be costs and they would be coming back to the applicant, but in the package I didn't see that addressed.
Yeah, there will be costs for connecting to that. And I believe once we file the final application, we will have to provide a cost estimate.
Got it. Okay, yeah, it says unknown at this time. I guess you really told me that, didn't you? We'll have it for the final. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other planning board members with questions first for Steve before we talk to the trust?
So I can also, give you a little bit of, just additional information regarding some additional process that has occurred around this, the review of the plan. So since, we had a completed application that came in, I think right around the time whenever, when we suspended our meetings, we did go ahead and engage Acorn Engineering, the town's peer review engineer, to take a look at the stormwater design that was done here, and they did provide commentary back to Sebago Tech, which were addressed. We had some minor tweaks, relative to stormwater calcs that were that were as part of that review. But I did want to let the board know that that review had been completed, and we can certainly provide a copy of their comments that were subsequently addressed to the board if they're interested.
Good, yeah, because that was usually one of the things we ask quickly is getting a peer review, so.
Yeah, we just went ahead and did it.
Thank you much.
Yeah, we appreciate it too. Getting that out of the way.
Yeah,
Just one other question I had written down. What are the plans for the existing well that's being maintained? Who's going to own that, and what maintenance will there be associated with it?
I guess they could keep it. It could be used for irrigation. We really haven't thought that much about it. It is on lot 4.
Yeah.
I don't know much about the well. I know it was just used to fill the ice rink.
Okay, I just, it looked like an administrative problem more than a technical problem.
Yeah, I mean, due to the location, of where the septic system is going to be going in for lot 4, that well will not be, would not be able to be used for drinking water purposes. So, I can't speak for the property owner, what they're, what the trust is going to do with that well. But ultimately, it's not a water source that's going to be able to be used for, for drinking purposes.
Has it been tested?
No, I don't believe it. I don't believe it's been tested. Since this, since this project has moved forward under the design guidelines that it's going to be utilizing public water. No, I'm not aware of any well testing that's been done.
Yeah, I don't know if it was ever used for drinking source anyway.
Right.
I don't think they're very large. I know, I'm not seeing it in my application.
Yep. So yeah, so both representatives from the Housing Trust, so that would be Pat Briggs and Pat Clancy, will be available to to answer questions regarding the specifics on the homes.
I do know from a footprint standpoint, the wider units is a 1-story, and then the skinnier one is a 2-story. But they can talk more specific about square footage.
any more comments from the board?
Yeah. So all right. So Steve, if you are if you're done with your screen share for the moment, I'm going to go ahead and remove your screen share.
Sounds good.
So Tom, I don't know if you want to go through a process of asking board members for any questions relative to Steve, or if at this point you want to bring forward either Pat Briggs or Pat Clancy.
Well, why don't we Yes, well, if you could figure out who. Yes, please. Please identify yourself.
No, this is Pat Briggs. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay,
We do voice anyway.
no, I'm here, to answer any questions. I was going to wait until you were completely through. I know Pat Clancy is also here and available to answer any questions as well. So I don't want to interrupt your flow.
Okay. All right. Well, let me. The only questions I had that I haven't brought up yet were I spent some quality time reading the lease, and the common expenses, the trust will be taking care of a common expenses and then billing it out to the individual owners. And so that makes sense for plowing the road. Would that also be part of plowing the common driveway, or would that be a separate issue? And also my other question relates to septic. You've got your duplex units have a single septic tank. So how does the maintenance of that septic tank handled? It's just somehow split between the two homeowners?
Yes, is a short answer to that.
It's not part of your common expenses then?
No, the common expenses, as you pointed out earlier, apply to the road. It's like a homeowners association would be plowing the road for snow plowing and so forth. And the costs for the septics would be split between the two homeowners.
Okay, but all 6 homeowners would split the cost of the road that only serves 3 of them?
No, it would serve all of them. I mean, you've got 2 roads to deal with.
Okay, so you're treating a second driveway as a road also?
Yes, for this purpose.
Okay. The other thing on page 13, it discusses mandatory insurance. Does that include FEMA insurance? Is that mandatory for them?
I don't know. Maybe Pat Clancy knows.
Flood insurance, so flood insurance for these homes wouldn't be required as they're located outside. They're not located within a designated floodplain area.
Not a bad thing to get anyway, though. Okay.
True. Yeah, but not something that's that's required here. But agree with you 100%. Always a good idea. And also just to clarify, on the duplex units, those units each they do each have their own individual septic tank for each unit. So they don't go into they share a single field, but each unit has its own separate tank.
Okay, so they have separate tanks, but there's a common leaching field then?
That's correct, yes.
Got it, okay.
But if one resident ruins the septic field, then they're both responsible?
So typically, yeah, the maintenance costs for a field would be shared. Subject to their maintenance agreement.
Well, I know for a fact that if you drain a water softener into a septic tank, you're going to ruin your septic field. Is there anything that's going to be put in the lease about that?
I don't know why they would have water, you say water softener?
Yeah, there's no water softeners are going to be needed for these properties since they'll be on town water.
Yeah.
At the same time, the garbage disposals that come to mind as something one doesn't want to have on a septic tank unless one likes to rebuild leaching fields.
Yeah, we've addressed that, Tom, in the fact that we would have a filter before the tank and after the tank so that nothing would pass through, which is what you expect from a garbage disposal. So it wouldn't be passed into the leach field to clog it up. You see what I mean?
Yeah, it'd still be better to put it in the lease.
Oh,
To say, don't do it.
don't, yeah, true.
Okay.
I have several questions, and one is, we've had a letter from an abutter that discusses some things about, the lease and has some questions. And I think some of them are answered in the lease, but you might want to go through that abutter's letter and answer things like, what happens if the Heritage Housing Trust goes down, the leaseholder? And answer that for them. I have some questions about things that are not in the lease, which bother me a lot, since a subdivision, tries to preserve wetlands and wildlife, and we're trying to get people like families into, I think, families, maybe, into these units. And there'd be people coming perhaps not from Maine, or maybe from Maine, who are not very well educated in how to preserve wildlife, like bird crashes, which I've talked about before, and how to, not put whole bunches of pesticides on your lawn, which goes out and poisons lobsters, things like that. And I don't see anything at all about that in the lease, any restrictions whatsoever. And I know I've talked about this during the sketch plan that you had. And I know I've offered to talk to the Heritage Housing Trust about it, but I've had no offers. And I can tell you right now that if we're trying to get people into Kennebunkport that we want to be good residents, I want them to know about what it takes to preserve the natural surroundings around them. And I want to see bird-friendly architecture, which is not costly today at all, which many towns and cities like New York and so forth have put into their statutes. And I want to see no, pesticide use on lawns and around. And I want to see them understand what it takes to preserve trees and why we preserve trees. I see nothing to that effect that would educate the people that are going into this housing. I also have a question about how big these houses are. And are you, I don't know what the Federal Housing Act is on discrimination, but, how are you going to determine who buys these houses?
So I think, at this point, a number of questions that are being brought forward that Pat Clancy may be have some answers to those questions that the board is asking for. But I think we would need Pat to identify himself, raise his hand.
Well, before we leave to go to Pat, I'm aware of a request by abutters for information that came in at 3 o'clock this afternoon. It had probably 5 questions in it. I think it's because it's important that they get a fully developed answer and, try to nail down things here that we're not quite sure about. I'm just asking for time to
Of course.
and I think what Nina brought up are incorporated in that letter. I just don't have the chance now to prepare an answer. So if it's okay, we'll defer that.
So let me respond. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The single family homes are about 1,170 square feet, a little short of 1,200 square feet. And they are 3 bedrooms. The 2-story homes are about 1,650 square feet. and they're also 3 bedrooms. And we basically, let me just assure you that the questions about financial feasibility and this being a viable way to go about doing affordable housing, we certainly have, right now, very straightforward answers to those things. We are relying on no fundraising that has not already taken place. By the time we start construction, we will have 6 home buyers, and they will each have mortgage commitments in hand, based upon which we will begin construction. So this is a fairly common approach to doing affordable home ownership, restricting its value over time, and we will be doing with the homeowners that come in. They will be required to have basically homeowner education courses that they a course that they participate in. And we've arranged with an organization that provides that training to do that in Kennebunkport, so that we can also, to the extent any of the folks may not know Kennebunkport already, make sure that there is, a full opportunity to familiarize themselves with Kennebunkport. We will be looking to offer the kind of preferences that we can, consistent with fair housing law, to people who do have connections to the local area. And so we expect that, majority of our homeowners will be people who are familiar with Kennebunkport and have connections to the area. And we also expect to work with them both even before we start construction on educating them as to the town and expectations, and working with them over time as well. Thus the lease and the framework that you see in the lease, under which we will continue to have a working relationship with them for everything from common expenses to to any uses of any of the open space that they may want to plan together.
Now, one thing in conjunction with what Nina said, when we've seen subdivision plans in the past, we have seen such things as what kind of lawn fertilizer they're going to be using. I believe when Mr. Doe was last in front of us with the binnacles, that those requirements were in. I think those would be good things to put into the lease at some point.
Well, I would like to see more than that. I would like to see the architecture so that basically birds do not crash into windows at all. There's fritted glass now that's not costly at all, doesn't add to the cost of a house. There are ways to put in overhangs so that birds do not see reflections and crash into windows. And I would like to see the architecture reflect that if we're going to have control over the building of the house and the design of the house. I think that's important to teach people. And in terms of affordable housing, people talk about how they want families to come in. Well, could be families, could be, a single person, could be different, could be retirees even. I don't see any discrimination at all as long as they meet the financial requirements, but maybe you do. I don't know, but I want to, especially if families have children, I want to see some education there. This is a perfect example of how we can add it and teach people about trees, about birds, about wildlife, and what it takes to maintain an insect and bird population that needs wildlife. So I'm not just looking about, sitting them down and talking to them. I'm talking about putting restrictions into that lease.
May I add on to that? I'm concerned, Nina, that we haven't levied such broad constraints on any other subdivision. Are you thinking it's because this is for affordable housing that it needs additional education? And if so, why?
I'm thinking that, well, one, I would like to see the town ordinances changed, so this is a requirement. Many towns and cities are now making it a requirement that all architecture be bird friendly. New York City has just done that. All renovations have to be bird friendly glass. It's imperative at this point. We're losing 1 million birds a year just in New York City, with birds crashing into skyscrapers. And 40% of the birds that we lose each year are residential crashes. They're not skyscrapers. You know, I've pushed this before, I agree. I haven't pushed it very hard, but I think now is the time to say, if we want to have a good natural environment around us, and we want to have things like insect-eating birds, birds that go after mosquitoes and ticks, that we need to save that population, and we need to emphasize, especially in subdivisions, that this is what you need to do.
I don't dispute that, but I think you put your finger on it in saying that the current land use ordinance does not require it. And so I think while we advocate for it, I'd have a hard time insisting.
Well, you know, if you look at the land use ordinance and its requirements of maintaining a good wildlife and natural environment, I think you can interpret it that way. The other board members may not see the same things that I do and may not want to require it, but I can tell you right now that I'm not comfortable with a town putting together affordable housing without looking at this and without requiring it. And it basically is the town, because we've set up a 503c corporation. It doesn't matter to me. It basically is the town looking for people to move in and to be good residents. And to be a good resident, you have to know what it takes to live in Maine, and you have to know what it takes to maintain the natural environment and what it takes to maintain a good wildlife population. I think it's becoming crucial at this point. I see people come in from out of state, they clear the trees off the property, they want a perfect lawn. I see the pesticide companies come in, they spray on windy days, they don't bother with any of the statutes or ordinances or anything like that. And, you know, the lobster and fishermen are complaining about the lobsters, the population of lobsters and fish going down. Well, one of the reasons for that is the stuff we're putting into the water. And one of the reasons.
So you would argue that you would not, you're not in favor of levying this as a requirement across all new subdivisions, but because this is a town applicant, a town-sponsored advocate, that it needs to be held to a higher standard.
Well,
is that how I understand you?
Well, I'm holding it to a higher standard, yes. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm looking at all subdivisions in this light at this point. And the board may not agree with me, the board members, but I think it's part of what we need to do in Kennebunkport.
I don't disagree with the intent. I just have a problem with the process, or understanding the process. I really was of the mind that this had to become a part of the land use ordinance and be voted on by the town before we could levy it as a requirement.
Actually, this is in the subreg that we're talking, not the land use ordinance, and the subreg is out.
The subreg also deals with that.
So
I see. So Tom, you would interpret the subreg as requiring this now.
I would say if we wish to put this in, we need to modify the subreg, but it is our document to modify, unlike the land use ordinance.
Yeah, so just, just to be clear, I mean, I think there's there've been a number of good points, that have been brought up, and, there's certainly good things for, for applicants to consider. But, I want to remind the board that, the scope of your authority is what's specified in the subdivision regs, relative to what's been published, by this board. So it's important, to know that, because that's certainly what applicants rely on, whenever they put together, when they put together an application, and they do their due diligence. So just want to bring that up as a reminder to the board. I think that it's great to ask questions, regarding the architecture, in order to see, it's always good to ask. However, it is, it is not something that we typically deal with, as a request for other subdivisions that we've had in town, unless that's been deemed as something, that falls under the board's jurisdiction.
Well, you mentioned trees, and we certainly have seen enough mods to subreg because they want to cut down some trees that we have to go and modify their the house footprint that was put into the subdivision. So
sure. Yep. Yeah, no, I think it's important. I mean, typically when I look at when I look at a subdivision plan that's been approved, and it specifies a building envelope, most property owners assume that if you've got an identified building envelope, that that they have the flexibility to build within that envelope, and subject, of course, to any to restrictions that the board may put on a plan. I do think that it is certainly appropriate for the board to to discuss how they want to see the open space handled. It's appropriate to put in conditions and protections relative to the open space, as well. But again, just so the board kind of understands how we deal with subdivision applications as as property owners put in applications. If we have a building envelope, not everything can be anticipated at the planning board level, and so there's always to some degree some flexibility that's needed within designated building envelopes.
Well, I would just like to point out, you might want to take a look at subdivision regs 11.8, especially C, and also 11.12, impact on groundwater quality. Those will be the areas that pretty much cover it.
If I can add to the Nina's concern about clearing, we did prepare the grading plan, which shows limits of clearing. Now, the two that are closest to the skating rink, a lot of that's already been cleared. And we're showing a little bit additional clearing, primarily to accommodate grading, fill slopes for the units and septic fields, and give them a somewhat decent sized yard area, because we're assuming these people will have kids. But really the rest of and same with the other two lots right off Main Street, there's really a limited building area that we can actually clear for these lots, because there are wetland areas around that. And the developer, being, the people building the houses, are going to do the clearing ahead of time, and they're going to control the land. So that's going to be some control on, these owners going back out later and cutting trees. I just don't see that happening. Because again, I think the wetlands kind of restrict where they can go for any kind of additional cutting.
No, I understand that from your plan.
Okay.
I'm much more concerned with the architecture and bird crashes, since you're in a wooded area and a place where birds fly around. The other thing I'm very interested in is if you have a lawn area, that people don't throw the pesticides all around there, especially if
Yep.
at East Creek.
No, I understand. That's a good point. I think, I was trying to, while we were chatting, I was trying to see if I could find images of the architecture. I believe they probably have double hung windows. You know, these are affordable housing. They're going to have very, you know, off the shelf kind of windows on them. I don't think you're seeing big picture windows. I think they are double hung, so they're going to have screens on them. What else can I say? I agree with the pesticides. I mean, we are right near the stream. I think that's a valid concern, and you know, keep it organic or no pesticides. So, and I would look to Pat to comment on that, but that would be I would think that would be reasonable.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable restriction, and I would urge you to look. Things are changing very quickly in the glass and window inventories and manufacturing, and more places are putting up different types of glass or designing buildings so that birds, you know, there's no reflection there and birds cannot fly into it, because they fly into even double hung windows, especially if people take the screens off.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of architects, you know, that work in smaller towns are aware of this yet. And I think it's important that we make them aware of it, because the glass manufacturers are coming through with glass that is not extremely expensive. It's going into all sorts of buildings now. New York is requiring it, Toronto requires it. You know, whole bunches of places. The federal government has got bills out there that all federal buildings be designed bird friendly. At this point, I don't know whether that's passed or not. That's Bill 919. And I think you can do it without adding to the cost of the house.
Well, we can look into that. They do have an architect, a local architect on board. So, and they are using a builder from Maine. So we will look into those. Looks like Tom's trying to talk, but he's muted.
Yeah, it looks like we got,
Okay, let's unmute. Anyway, we start with Larry for comments and questions. With the mute turned, you're muted, Larry, same as I was.
Exactly, there we go. Okay, so no, it looks like a good package. A lot of work's been put into it so far, and I appreciate his comments for sure about the restricting the pesticides and adding the glass, bird-friendly glass. I think that's actually a very important issue. And as I was hearing the comments and Ed's comment concerning trying to maybe make too many requirements on this development, I mean, it occurred to me whether or not we wanted to think about it as a model development. I don't know, for this and future subdivisions. We don't have to answer that right now, but it certainly seems like we have an opportunity to include a lot of considerations and stipulations that would make it a very attractive location to now and in the future.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. Ed, do you have any more?
No, nothing else. Thank you.
Okay, John?
I just, whoa. I'd just like to echo what Larry and Nina said. I think this is an opportunity for us to make a statement.
Okay. Scott?
Yes, it looks like Yeah, that looks fair, as long as, well, I guess it doesn't make a precedence about other subdivisions where these people feel that they're being unduly chastised, I guess.
Okay, have any other comments on the plan in general?
No, it looks good.
Okay,
Yeah, I think the plan looks good, but I just remembered something from one of the abutters letters that I think you might want to address when we come to the public hearing.
yeah, well,
That's-
Pat Briggs already discussed that they're gonna look at the letter. They just got it this afternoon, as I did also. So hopefully, it'd be nice if you did a point by point one, as Ed had suggested for the previous applicant also, is go through what the abutter says and agree to it or refute it or whatever, but so that we have a good handle on it, and that'll help when we have a public hearing on the unit here. Okay, I don't know if George is still there or not. It never got there. But I guess no one's raising hands, so. All right, I guess,
I will. I'm George Licking, a member of the planning.
oh, awesome. Hi, George.
Both here.
Promote him.
I agree. I think it's a terrific plan. I would like to see the environmental concerns addressed, and obviously you will address the concerns that came to us this afternoon. I think they were worthy of address.
Okay, good. Can I, in that case, can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to find the preliminary plan complete.
Okay, I'll second it. And then I'm going to go around, and again, in the order on my screen. Sorry about that, but okay, I'm in favor. Larry?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Ina?
Aye.
Okay, so it is deemed complete. We will have the first of probably two public hearings at our next meeting, which is on the 17th. So, that being said, I would like an additional motion.
Would you like to assign a case manager to
Oh,
that?
I'd love to assign a case manager. Does anybody really want to volunteer for it? 'Cause I suppose I should do it if otherwise. Oh, I'll do it. What the hell?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So, all right. So let me get a motion to adjourn from someone. All right, I'll move we adjourn.
That's right.
All right, they're all in favor. Raise your fingers.
Aye.
Aye, okay,
Aye.
so adjourned.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Everybody.
All right.
Thank you, all you leases.
Thanks.
All right.